The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
And the third domino is about to drop as the Screen Actors Guild Association of Radio and TV Artists are ready to go ahead, and they're in contract talks right now, but the strike is ready to go for the third leg of Hollywood's labor union strike. First, it was the Writers Guild, the Directors Guild followed that, and right now SAG-AFTRA is ready to go ahead and get ready to strike come up July 1st. So what we thought was going to happen, a long, dragged out, drawn out strike that was going to go ahead and really start taking effect significantly on all the major network studios, all the major networks, all the studios, content in general. A lot of Hollywood people are being affected right now from it. And it's time to go and get to the part where we are at SAG-AFTRA. And now it's time to go and see what's going to happen here. Fran Drescher leads the group there for that. And let's go and get through all that's going on here. So the entertainment industry has been waiting to see whether the Actors Guild talks on a new contract with the AMPTP, the Alliance of Motion Picture TV Producers, would lead to a tentative agreement or an order to join writers on the picket lines. I think it's going to happen anyway. We're not going to get this done right away. The actors have pretty much been in lockstep with the writers. They understand the importance of the writers here. So that's something that's going to be happening at the moment. That's going to be something we have to consider right now. Now, with that said, union spokespeople declined to comment. It's a customary media blackout during contract negotiations. But individuals with knowledge of the talks told TheWrap.com that there's a good chance the Guild would announce an extension with the AMPTP that would last beyond the 4th of July weekend. So prior to the start of the talks, SAG-AFTRA leaders said that their contract negotiations traditionally involve detailed discussions on terms for various types of performers, stuntmen, background actors, among others. If an extension is called, it may be simply to give negotiators time to iron out details, but it does not change anything that goes along from what the other areas are going to come along. I still think that the actors want to be in lockstep. They don't want to go back onto the work when they don't have the writers out there for them to work with them in lockstep. So last weekend, the Guild released a video from President Fran Drescher and National Executive Director Duncan Crabtree, Ireland, expressing optimism of the progress made. The final stages are happening under an atmosphere of intense labor militancy and union solidarity that has not been seen in Hollywood for decades. Now, earlier this week, there was a letter that was shared and signed by hundreds of SAG-AFTRA members, a lot of A-listers. We'll talk about that in a moment. A-listers like Meryl Streep and Jennifer Lawrence, urging the Guild's negotiating committee to not settle for unsatisfactory compromises on key issues like consent and compensation for AI recreations or performers. And along with AI, the Screen Actors Guild and the SAG-AFTRA is looking for stricter regulations regarding the use of audition tapes, which Guild insiders have become too burdensome on actors. Among the abuses the Guild is looking to curtail are demands on actors to perform significant portions of the script with less than 2 or 3 days to memorize, provide their own costuming and sets, or rent out performance space. What are they doing this for? Why are the actors having to do this themselves when it's a full-fledged production? And the fact that if the actors need a little bit more time to memorize lines to prepare, I mean, it would be nice to have that. But then it's also upon the production people working with the actors to give these people some time for them to go and be prepared for the work, the craft. Like, wouldn't you want them to be prepared so that you can actually run smoothly the set? I mean, that's a pretty logical thing. The biggest potential sticking point may be the battle over viewership data. Like the Writers Guild, SAG-AFTRA members are demanding that streamers divulge closely guarded numbers about the performance of their shows and movies and compensate creatives based on their performance. Good. Which means Netflix would have to give out the numbers. They would have to open up their books and give significant numbers. Same thing for the streamers like Hulu or Disney Plus or what have you. That's also very similar to the story that was brought up But the Directors Guild feeling the same way, which is very interesting. We'll talk about that in a minute. But back into the SAG-AFTRA talks. The recently ratified contract between the Directors Guild and the AMPTP didn't have any terms regarding viewership data, increasing the fact that the AMPTP is using that as a precedent to not include such terms in a potential agreement with the Writers Guild or SAG-AFTRA, both of which publicly said they support DGA and its agreement but would not be beholden to the Guild's terms during negotiations. Directors Guild went along and did it. And that was in good faith so that the Writers Guild might go ahead and fall in line for the AMPTP, right? That's the idea here. For the studios, the producers, that's what they're talking about. Studios have been forced to significantly alter their marketing plans for summer blockbusters to account for a potential strike that would see actors pull out of press junkets, movie premieres, major fan events, and conventions. So think about this. Well, you might have Phoebe Waller-Bridge and Indiana Jones, at the red carpet for Indiana Jones and a Dial of Destiny, or seeing Barbie's premiere with Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling. Well, they might not have those opportunities to have these stars promote these movies when they come out. That's a big deal. So Warner Brothers held a lavish press junket and photo call in Beverly Hills for Barbie ahead of its July 21st release. And interviews were offered with Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling ahead of the contract deadline. And multiple studios now, which were planning to host panels and sneak preview events, they're pulling out of San Diego Comic-Con next month. Wow. San Diego Comic-Con might be a wash as a result. That's a big deal. And even if talks between SAG-AFTRA and AMPTP fall through, even with a contract extension, Hollywood still have their strike going on from two of its unions for the first time since 1960, when the WGA and Screen Actors Guild both withheld their labor over compensation for reruns and airings of feature films, forming the foundation of the residual system that decades later is facing significant changes to a reflecting a streaming-first industry, right? And a deal on the other hand would actually lead to debates between the SAG-AFTRA membership over whether the tentative agreement's negotiated gains are enough to make it worthy of ratification or should be rejected to push for better terms. And that debate took place 3 years ago when there was a caucus called Unite for Strength. Now, these caucuses are talking about here, Unite for Strength, signaled that such a debate between them might not happen this time. Unite for Strength and Membership First. These are two opposing caucuses, by the way. They announced they would campaign together in the Guild's upcoming elections to re-elect Fran Drescher as president and Membership First member Jolie Fisher as secretary-treasurer, along with a unified slate of candidates and national board and a local board. A lot of solidarity among all these unions right now as they are coming into this play right now, which could very much happen right now. So the Directors Guild, they've also talked about streaming data, which is a new wrinkle that I didn't bring up on the program in previous episodes, but we should bring it about it now. Now, in the deal for the Directors Guild, they were able to secure significant increases in residuals and tie them to future worldwide subscriber growth for streaming services. But members say that's not enough, as they want the DGA to push for streamers to divulge viewership data. So the directors also want the same thing as well in the negotiations. As we know, streamers have kept their information, complete information on the number of viewers that watch certain titles under heavy wraps, even to their creators. And this is creating industry-wide frustration among writers, showrunners, directors, and actors, often kept in the dark about the size of your audience, when they only want to talk about the fact that, well, there might be all these subscribers on all the streamers. They can't tell you what shows are doing well. They'll give you like your top 10. It's very vague at best. The vast majority actually don't, behind streaming shows and films, don't know the size of their audience. But there are some big hits that the guilds know are making their creators much less than what they bring to streaming services. So they want to be properly paid for it and get the numbers to go ahead and get paid properly. But there is a push to disclose viewership data as one of the goals in the ongoing writer strike. David Goodman, chief negotiator, former president of WGA West, he makes the point and says that when we broke off negotiations with the AMPTP, they did offer us somewhat higher residuals, but didn't offer something really that reflects the enormous profits they were making from our shows worldwide. At some point, he says, is important, at some point, the streamers are going to have to divulge more of its data if they want to attract advertisers, but right now, they're just not budging. And let's make that point as well. Like, how do advertisers want to be involved with the streamers if they don't know the numbers? Nielsen's done that for cable and network, and that's how you find out the rates. There is no sweeps period. Shows can come on at any time whenever they want. So if you want the advertising dollars, you're going to have to divulge more. And if the advertisers are not able to get it, then the talent needs to be able to get it. It makes sense to me. You could have done that for a long time, sure, but the thing is, it doesn't stay like that forever. So the proposed Directors Guild contract, members will be voting on through Friday evening. And this, by the way, this is going back to the last week, so I don't know if it was actually done or not. Does not secure viewership data or tied to residual pay. The DGA has secured a residual pay structure that's tied to the number of global subscribers that a streaming service has. We'll see a 21% increase in residuals for 1 hour TV series, 34% increase in residuals for films produced for streaming. So the new system, the larger streaming services like Netflix and Disney Plus will pay roughly $90,000 over 3 years for a 1 hour TV series. 3-year payments for streaming films will increase to $230,000 each. But the Directors Guild feels there needs to be more done. Peter Atencio, who directed The Machine, he actually makes the point and says, quote, we need to go back to being an industry that rewards performance and success. We need to force the studios and streaming companies to open up viewer data and properly compensate the films and series that attract the most viewers. Correct. Everything that's being put now in the labor strike, they're hitting a lot of demands and sticking to it. They are right about the size of the writer's room, the compensation, the residuals, and getting fact-based data on those residuals. Correct. And they also need to go ahead and worry about AI. Like, these are all important issues. Like, the unions right now, what the members are asking for, they're reasonable. All of it. The studios are going to have to comply. Now, in this time age right now where they're losing money, a lot of layoffs going on, we saw more news media layoffs. I'll talk about that in a little bit. This is all going on and continues to go on. And there's just no end in sight. And even if these studios are hemorrhaging money right now and they're not making their money from the shareholders and they're starting to lose shares and their valuations are starting to dwindle, it doesn't change anything that it can get better in the future, but they have to take care of all these people underneath them to get them in the right place. And the fact that this is going on here tells you a lot. We're 60 days in. Well, actually, no, we're what? Yeah, we are 60 days in, right? And nothing has really much changed at all. Like, we're waiting. We're trying to figure out what happens here. Or no, maybe it has been. So what? 60 or no? Yeah, 60 days, right? Don't get me wrong. I almost forget right now. It's been a while, more than I thought. He also adds that Atencio, by the way, this will become particularly important as the studios try to return to advertising-driven streaming, right? Because now they have no choice. They have to go back to the advertisers to make money off of them because there's not enough money from subscribers to withstand or to prop up the streamers. Residuals need to be tied to viewership, not subscribers. Yes. Because the other thing, too, is that what are you going to have to set as the subscribers and what do they drop? I mean, it should be viewership. Because the money should be properly doled out. That's the idea here. Sounds pretty reasonable. On top of pushing for viewership data and greater AI protections, members are also asking for a no vote because of their own needs. but it's also out of support for the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA. Lily Wachowski, who created the Matrix series, made a point and says that I believe as directors, we need to be protecting everyone who we make art with as much as we can, and the language in our negotiations should reflect that. We need to be looking down the line at what every other union is fighting for and try to incorporate it with our own as much as possible. So let's go into the story now. Fran Drescher spoke with Good Morning America and makes the point that contract talks are making headway in some areas, but in some areas we're not. So she spoke with Michael Strahan and talked about it. The contract expires June 30th, 11:59 p.m. Pacific. And by the time you hear this episode, we will already be at the deadline. That's the plan. So Michael Strahan asks, are you making headway? And she says, some areas we are, some areas we're not. In the strike authorization vote, the Guild laid out, SAG-AFTRA, by the way, laid out key bargaining issues, economic fairness, residuals, regulating the use of artificial intelligence, alleviating the burdens of the industry-wide shift to self-taping. Right. And the Guild said outdated contract terms, coupled with the evolution of the media business, shorter season orders, longer hiatuses between seasons, makes it increasingly difficult for our members to achieve and maintain a middle-class lifestyle working as a performer. In sharp contrast to the diminishing compensation paid to our members, the studios are posting immense profits with a bullish outlook as demonstrated by lavish corporate executive compensation. Now, the point of self-taped auditions, they say, are unregulated and out of control. Too many pages, too little time, unreasonable requirements have made self-taping auditions a massive daily uncompensated burden on the lives of performers. Reasonable rules and limitations and access to other casting formats are sorely needed to ensure fair access to work opportunities and protect performers against exploitation. So now the question's loomed. All these Hollywood websites are all given the story. And oh, that's right. The Writers Guild right now has been going for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. DJ affirmed the studio is deal with the studios. So Directors Guild has signed. And SAG-AFTRA has been bargaining with the MPTP as of June 7th. But like we said, any extension doesn't change the fact that we could still have striking going on by the actors at some point anyway. So what happens to Hollywood if the actors go on strike? That's a question that was asked, and Deadline decided to write about it. Let's go into it. 160,000 actors make up the SAG-AFTRA, the union of the actors and all those artists that are on camera. Will there be an actor strike on top of the writer's strike, which is in its 9th week? Oh, okay. So the writer's strike, 9 weeks now. That's what I thought, right? Yeah, we're getting the 60 days already now. So what happens if there are 2 strikes? Will SAG-AFTRA extend its negotiations with the studios and then strike, or will they extend and strike a deal? Would an actor's strike compound the pain across the entertainment industry that's already reeling for the writer's strike? If SAG-AFTRA calls a strike at midnight Pacific on Friday, or even after an extension sometime next week, there would be huge ramifications. And here's what we got. Because it's a lot of things. It could start from the total shutdown of scripted television and feature films, an impact on Wall Street, the studio's bottom lines, potential interruption of events like the Emmys, Comic-Con, and the Fall Film Festival season. Here's what we got right now. In television, most scripted TV series have already been shut down because of the writer's strike. A part of a handful of series like American Horror Story this season starring Kim Kardashian, production largely has ground to a halt in LA, New York, and Atlanta. J.J. Abrams' Duster, The Penguin, Daredevil, Born Again, Billions, Robert De Niro's Zero Day, The Old Man, and Severance have been shut down. Writing for such shows as Abbott Elementary, Yellow Jackets, Stranger Things, and Cobra Kai have been halted. Apple's Metropolis from Sam Esmail has been shut down entirely. If the actors walked, there would be more casualties. A large number of U.S. shootings are shooting abroad right now, in the UK and Europe. Those would also shut down, largely having been out of the glare of picket signs up to now. So international markets are going to get affected by this as well. Those shows include House of the Dragon, Andor, Slow Horses, and Industry, and could affect new titles such as HBO's Kate Winslet drama The Palace, Peacock's Day of the Jackal remake, and Julianne Moore's Mary and George. Sharon Horgan's Bad Sisters was expected to start shooting shortly, while British series with U.S. involvement, like the Disney Plus co-production Doctor Who, all likely will be hit. So Doctor Who would also shut down production. The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, recently moved to the UK, is thought to have finished shooting. So that show's going to go ahead and move on. Lord of the Rings will get their premiere over on Amazon Prime, I guess the second season, right? SAG-AFTRA has a global rule. Global Rule 1. Very more restrictive than the Writers Guild. And that rule is, quote, no member shall render any services or make an agreement to perform services for any employer who has not executed a basic minimum agreement with the union, which is in full force and effect in any jurisdiction where there is a SAG-AFTRA national collective bargaining agreement in place. The fall schedule for the U.S., mostly the networks and cable, will be impacted even further. And then the unscripted programming would also take a hit by SAG-AFTRA. Unscripted has started to pick up after a slow beginning to the writer's strike. Many broadcast shows are hosted by an executive by WGA and SAG-AFTRA talent, and a handful of game shows and competition shows have been forced to delay production as some actors are unwilling to cross the picket lines. Yeah. So even all the summer programming might take a halt. Well, that's what they already have is already done. Now about films. A full-on SAG-AFTRA strike would mean a shutdown of feature Hollywood productions worldwide. There will be no movies made. No television made. And as a result, if this is the case, a prolonged SAG-AFTRA and WGA strike will trigger the motion picture industry, and the fourth quarter of theatrical releases would become a desert, which means anything set up for Thanksgiving and Christmas probably be pulled and delayed. They would not run them. They would hold them off. Wow, that's horrible. Currently, there are no plans by the major studios to move titles from this year to next year. There has been some delay of several movies, some deep into 2026, and beyond, the scripts weren't ready. We have Avengers Kang Dynasty going from 2025 to 2026, and Avengers Secret Wars from 2026 to 2027. Thunderbolts has not been able to shoot since the WGA strike. Hopefully will meet their 2024 theatrical release, with Disney moving that Marvel movie from July 26th to December 20th. Deadpool 3, nearly completed, will kick off summer next year during the first weekend of May. And Captain America's Brave New World will be pushed from May 3rd to July 26th, 2024. The major feature shoots potentially shut down by a SAG-AFTRA strike would also include Paramount's Gladiator 2, shooting in Europe, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 2, Universal's untitled radio silence monster thriller Sony's Venom 3, and Warner Brothers' Clint Eastwood drama Juror Number 2. And other productions have been racing to beat the strike and poised to finish as soon as early July. Sony's been filming Bad Boys 4. It recently wrapped in Atlanta and is only doing pickup shots in Miami. Warner Brothers has Beetlejuice 2, starring Michael Keaton. It's right now in London. And Jason Momoa starring Minecraft movie look to wrap in the next week. Sony's Ghostbusters Afterlife sequel has wrapped up in London, and ditto for the Amy Winehouse biopic Back to Black by Focus Features. What about the award shows and Comic-Con? So the Emmys right now, according to Deadline.com, they understand it's a pivotal month for whether the TV award show will go ahead as scheduled on September 18th. There are conversations on the show, which is on Fox. They're starting to begin on July 15th, and a decision by the end of the month on whether the September date is possible. If the actors strike or is there an extension, it would be difficult from a logistical point of view. It's also a date SAG-AFTRA and the WGA are aware of, so it's likely something the unions are using for leverage. If the Emmys are rescheduled, we hear it's likely the 75th anniversary show that will pivot to January. Then there's San Diego Comic-Con that's being affected. Many TV creators, due to WGA picketing, can't head down to there for the panels. That's Sony, Marvel Studios, Lucasfilm, Netflix, Universal. Well, any of you that were going to San Diego Comic-Con, oh boy, you're going to be up shit creek. Now, if talks are ongoing between the AMPTP and SAG-AFTRA and no strike is called, actors could show up at Comic-Con and make it a higher wattage event than what's currently anticipated. Studio premieres currently are planned for Barbie on July 9th in LA, Oppenheimer on July 17th in New York. At the very minimum of an actor strike, the respective directors for these movies would show up. Independent films. We're going to just skip on that, but they're going to say that a lot of filmmakers were hosed and unable to get bonded for anything that wasn't sure to wrap before June 30th. And so there's a lot of productions that are also getting shut down as well. Film festivals would also be affected. There's been no noticeable slowdown in prep for planning for fall festivals in light of a potential actor strike, but some are bringing international junkets forward, but that doesn't help the festivals. The length of any SAG strike would be crucial, they say. And if SAG-AFTRA members shooting abroad drop out of production shooting in Europe, some of their non-SAG-AFTRA co-stars could also join in solidarity and also stop shooting. And Deadline also talked to a number of indie producers and distributors in Europe that a SAG-AFTRA strike wasn't something they actively wanted, but it might create opportunity for their non-English language content to flourish with less English language content for the market. And then Wall Street. Work stoppages could accelerate the decline of linear television, and streamers like Netflix, with a plethora of content from overseas that would benefit even as it negotiates as part of the APTP. Linear TV gets hurt, streamers benefit, and Netflix is the biggest streamer. When COVID shut down production, Netflix already had a steady cadence of new shows. We recalled calling labor action and recent media layoffs potential near-term tailwinds and bullish for the company. The WGA strike by Wolf Research's Peter Sapino says it's a big risk for Hollywood because the possibility of an extended period of time without fresh content would play into the hands of every other form of engagement that doesn't require writers. That means YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok would be natural places to go. See, people are going to get to the point and say, okay, even streaming will not be enough for the average viewer. They could just go to Facebook Live, YouTube, or TikTok and go to find programming there and just take the couple of hours they were going to watch something else on streaming and just go to that. So you got to play along with this and realize there is a lot of ramifications altogether. Is this a good idea? Is this going to go well? Is it going to bode well at all? You got to figure that out. But when I look at all this, reading it over and over, we know that the writers had the issues when it comes to the size of the rooms, what they're getting paid, residuals, also wanting residuals based on actual, tangible streaming data, not subscribership, but viewership. And that's what they should ask for. But even here, we know that the last time they had the writer's strike was 100 days. Now we're at the point where negotiations have to get back on track. Now, of course, the APTP right now is talking with us. The actors mean a lot. And there's a much bigger crew right there. So now that the SAG-AFTRA's in strike and that comes into play, now the AMPTP has to move. Once that third domino drops, once it drops, they have to do something. They have to get negotiations up and running. They're negotiating now, but they're only negotiating for an extension. There's no word that they're going to get all the needs met. So the actors have more pull, more clout, and they're going to use that now to help the writers get what they want. And maybe that was the end goal for this in the first place. It's what it reads the way to me. That's what it looks like. So as the actors went along, we already talked about international acting could also proceed with the potential strike. That's another issue there. Even the writers are making sure that animated scribes are also going to be covered by the Writers Guild. The Animation Guild, which is an entirely separate union to the WGA, came out in support of the labor action, standing in solidarity with the Writers Guild. There you go. Michael Jamin is co-executive producer of King of the Hill and Brickleberry, as well as live action series like Tacoma FD and Lopez. He makes a point and says, by some strange loophole, animated shows are either covered by the Animation Guild or the WGA, and strangely, it's the studios that get to decide which one, not the writers. It seems to me that should be illegal. It seems like labor should decide which union they want us to belong to, not the employer. And many of the biggest animated hits are covered by the Writers Guild, which is Bob's Burgers, Family Guy, American Dad, The Simpsons, Netflix's Big Mouth and Disenchantment, as well as a number of series from CBS Studios. Last year, more than 1,500 Writers Guild members, including Seth MacFarlane, J.J. Abrams, Nick Kroll, Amy Poehler, Mike Schur, Mindy Kaling, and Spike Jonze, signed a pledge for the WGA to cover animation writers. So that's another thing we got to look at as well. Very interesting in that point as well. Let's talk about the A-list letter. The strike-in letter. It was a letter signed by 300 plus actors, Meryl Streep, Jennifer Lawrence among those. And members of the Screen Actors Guild say they're ready to strike for the best deal possible. Some of the others that wrote and also signed this letter include Rami Malek, Quinta Brunson, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Ben Stiller, Neil Patrick Harris, Amy Schumer, and Amy Poehler. So everyone who signed the letter says they're prepared to strike if it comes to that, even though it's not preferable because it brings incredible hardships to many. No one wants it. The members address a number of issues that are important negotiations. In the letter, they mention minimum pay, residuals, they consider the growth of streaming, healthcare, pensions, regulation around how self-tapes are used in the casting process. And the letter also calls out members' fears and concerns over AI. And then they also close and say that actors ask their leadership to push for change and to ensure the protections they're asking for. Quote, if you're not able to get all the way there, we ask you use the power given to you by us, the membership, and join the WGA on the picket lines. For our union and its future, this is our moment. We hope that on our behalf, you will meet that moment and not miss it. So it's time for this to get rolling. That final domino's dropping. This is it. There's no more change now. Now it's time to go ahead and get done. And there's not much else that can be said about it. It's a matter of significant stars that were decided to go ahead and put this down in a form of solidarity that from top to bottom, actors, directors, and writers, and all the other people behind the scenes, they're going to get their just due. And all the demands are met. This is not just pick and choose this time. They're not going to just take the bare minimum. They're going to take everything. But now it's upon the alliance of motion picture and TV producers to finish. They need to get their deals done. They need to go ahead and make the negotiations. The movie studios need to go ahead and concede. Concede to the demands. You're not going to win this war. You realize that what they're asking for is not without reason. Just because it's a bad economic time for you doesn't make a difference. The audience is going to abandon you more if you don't put out content. If you don't come through as people expect. This can be all avoided. So it's time to go ahead and do that as such, which makes sense to me. And it's very interesting how they got this letter put together. So it was a Google Doc that was sent over text. And then there were signatories in a text, and then you start seeing who's in this. And then other potential signatories also got in and signed in on it. It started on Monday. And so the whole week they were able to get this ready to go to put this out today. So it's a nice thing for the A-listers to go and do to get the support going for this right here. Okay, a few other things we got to bring up before we wrap things up on the show. Layoffs. Continued layoffs here. It's going on. And there's also some outrage going on in the media and news. Let's talk about that real quick. So let's first go to Forbes. That writes that there are more layoffs. The latest right now is the writing staff for National Geographic has cut. They've laid off all their staff writers, according to former employees. Adding to layoffs at Grazia, Bloomberg, and the Hollywood Reporter this month. Bloomberg, as of June 22nd, cut 10 people from the national news desk, radio and TV staff, according to Insider. Cheddar News laid off 12 employees. And we've talked about all the other ones before on previous episodes. If you want to go back and look for it, you can also look for that there. But here's one thing that really gets people all working up. Gizmodo or Geo Media. Staffers are appalled as the company is now starting to test AI-created content across their sites. Oh boy. So after Geo Media, which owns sites like The Onion, The Root, and Deadspin, announced it's rolling out AI-created content next week. Editorial Director Meryl Brown assured editorial employees via email the trial rollout will only produce a few stories, basically built around lists and data, and that these features aren't replacing work currently done by writers and editors. Yeah, but even the experiment is just enough to trigger. Well, we hope that over time, if we get these forms of content right and produce at scale, AI will, via search and promotion, help us grow our audience. This is the writing on the wall for these writers here, these journalists. Oh boy, your jobs are numbered, and your days are numbered on top of that. So the unions for The Onion and the Gizmodo Media Group, they shared a response on Twitter, quote, "They've given us no reason over the years to believe the statement. They've cited years of disinvestment, increased demands of reporters and editors, and attrition of staff. And the announcement comes mere days after the company laid off more than a dozen colleagues, including union employees. And the layoffs are cruel and incredibly callous." And by the way, Meryl Brown just joined the team as editorial director in January 2023. Look at this, 6 months later, AI being involved and intertwined. That's not good. Now let's talk about another story, which you might remember I talked ad nauseam about Travis Scott, the Astroworld Festival. It's been a while since we talked about it, but let's go ahead and bring it up now because we have not heard anything from Travis Scott. He has been very much persona non grata for a long time. This goes back to episode 201 of the program, right now at episode 284. So yeah, Travis Scott. There were lawsuits filed against Travis Scott, Drake, and Astroworld Festival organizers back in November of 2021 over a recent festival, the Astroworld Festival, where 10 dead victims have been identified. And there were two different lawsuits. A $2 billion lawsuit filed against the fest organizers following the tragedy. And then Travis Scott himself sued for $750 million over the Astroworld tragedy. And all that coming across. And then also 400 plus Astroworld victims suing Travis Scott, Live Nation, and others across the board to also punish. November 19, 2021 is when I reported on that. Well, now let's go and go for current day. 19 months of police investigation and a grand jury has decided that no one should be criminally charged over the 2021 disaster. Travis Scott and other Astroworld organizers will not face criminal charges. This is a grand jury in Houston that said no criminal charges will be filed. Investigators, according to the Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg, they had tracked down every piece of relevant evidence, many witnesses watching thousands and thousands of hours of video, and they took the findings of the grand jury. Scott's lawyer, Kent Schaefer, said the decision to not bring charges confirms what we've known all along, that Travis Scott is not responsible for the Astroworld tragedy, end quote. This consistent with investigative reporting by numerous media outlets and federal state government reports, squarely placing the onus for our event safety crises on organizers, operators, and contractors, not performers. So Travis Scott, the lawyer says, has been inaccurately and wrongly singled out despite stopping the show three separate times and being unaware of the events as they were unfolding. Now the chapter's closed. We hope for the government efforts to focus on what is more important, stopping future heartbreaking tragedies like Astroworld ever occurring again. And others were also cleared of criminal charges. Those were Brent Silberstein, a veteran Houston concert promoter serving as a freelance operations manager, John Janelle, security executive of Live Nation, Shauna Boardman and Seth Boardman from the crowd management company Contemporary Services Corporation, and Emily Ockenden, an employee at operations company BWG, listed as the first person to be contacted by emergency officials. Thousands of alleged victims filed more than 400 civil lawsuits against Scott, Live Nation, and other organizers, claiming they were legally negligent in how they planned and conducted the event, including failing to provide adequate security and emergency support. And the case is now combined into a single large action. The alleged victims are still seeking billions in damages. So the civil side still is in play. But no criminal charges. So there's that part. But Travis Scott, overall, his career has been tarnished as a result. It just happened. In the investigation, they had questions about the event's crowd control and safety preparedness. There was a 56-page event operations plan for the Astroworld Music Festival, protocols for dangerous scenarios like active shooters and severe weather, no information in the event of a crowd surge, they mentioned. Scott is still facing civil litigation from hundreds of lawsuits filed. One brought by a 21-year-old who was crushed and killed and was settled last year, and then there was a suit of a 9-year-old victim, and the family of that victim, it still remains open. So there's that part. Now let's get into some radio news to wrap things up on the show. Story from Sean Ross at RadioInside.com wants to go and make a point here and talk about Top 40 and Taylor Swift's Radio Karma. When Taylor Swift put out her Lover album, and there were so many songs that were singles after that, it just blew up, and she was a force to be reckoned with in Top 40 radio. Not the same right now for Midnights, because right now she has her song Lavender Haze. It's not necessarily up there in the highest rotation because the song Anti-Hero stayed around the charts for so long. So stations don't want to just play the multiple songs like that. Lavender Haze had no room because of Anti-Hero. So now she has the song Karma, second fastest growing song in Top 40 radio. It's one of the few times where an artist has a legitimate hit from a third hit from an album, and one released as a traditional 9-month remove from the first single. Now there's a song that's coming back, Cruel Summer, which is a song that was from earmarked as a single for summer 2020. A remnant from the 1989 period when Swift singles from a project were being taken more than a year to play out. So we're learning from what Taylor Swift's popularity in radio and how it matters. And this is a couple of things he talks about. When it comes to radio, albums matter, catalog matters. Because remember, we have a lot of songs out there that are not based on albums. Like albums have not mattered in terms of trying to sell them on radio for a long time. I mean, you hear singles, and those singles in some cases for a Taylor Swift, it is to draw people to buy her album. And so she has a robust catalog. Because a lot of artists now are in the streaming era strategy of releasing fewer albums and fewer follow-ups to existing hits. The industry prides itself on not milking albums, but there are songs that endure, and as it happens, it helps reinforce superstardom. Swift first came out from radio in the first place in 2005, 2006, right? And she's built a fan base and fashioned herself into a generational artist. And she has a radio veteran, Frank Bell, who continues, as a radio liaison. And he's always been able to go and help, where Swift has been able to continue to engage with radio. And for radio, they're grateful for that. So here's the interesting part. Cruel Summer was a song that should have been a hit 4 years ago. And some stations tried to play that song. But now the people are coming back to it. And here's the one thing he brings in here that I thought was very important. Programmer's Enterprise. At the time when the only song from the 1989 album that Taylor Swift put out back then, the only song that got any real airplay was Shake It Off. But then the song Blank Space was officially designated as a second single. But Shake It Off got all the airplay. Meanwhile, there were a lot of other songs that could have been playing by then. Radio felt it didn't need the Enterprise back then, which means get out of the rotation and say, well, these are the songs you're supposed to be playing. No, let's play some other songs and open up and be experimental and have some discovery. That's what they mean by Programmer Enterprise. For programmers to just go it on their own to discover new records and put them out there to rotate. Stations took dissatisfaction with Look What Made You Made Me Do. For stations look for other songs for reputation. And a no single strategy for them to acknowledge the excitement of folklore. Right, Look What You Made Me Do was not a great opening single, so there were other songs and reputation they decided to go after. And Lavender Haze was one of the popular songs once Midnights came out last year that people definitely gave a good response to, which meant that song was going to get a good chance to get pushed on the radio as a single. And he closes and says that maybe contemporary hit radio and hot adult contemporary stations should not give up on the concept of fostering core artists, and neither should labels. Streaming can only do so much to foster artists. Top 40 radio is not thriving under the current paradigm, but labels are laying off people too, and not just in radio promotion, but also for streamers. If we now think the old artist-centered strategy involved throwing good resources after bad, then we need to come up with a new one. Well, when you can't even do the right thing for Taylor Swift, which is a bona fide pop star, and on any radio station, when it comes to country, when it comes to pop, when it comes to adult contemporary, you have more than plenty of songs to play for Taylor Swift, including her new singles. She's a core artist. Treat her as such. A lot of songs will stay in power, and you know what? The audience is already feeling good. And they also make a point here, Sean Ross, that radio doesn't have enough hits right now to rely on entirely on streaming finding 2 to 3 unicorns a year. Songs that maybe radio missed a boat on, or the record labels missed a boat on. Streaming still is an important factor because we see what songs are at the top of the list and what songs should be played more. But a lot of stations are not going to go ahead and take streaming at their word. But it's the listenership. It's the people that are downloading and listening to the songs. Why they're not being considered in rotation. I mean, why are you not taking the easiest thing that you could be doing to help an audience? I mean, the thing is, as I said, radio discovery, I've said it over and over. Radio needs to be a place for new music discovery. And if you want to help the record labels sell some albums, then play some other songs off the list like you used to, and let people go ahead and discover some new music off an album that's bona fide that you know is going to do well. And let's figure out something here to go ahead and get radio to be relevant again. But we don't have that yet, and we're still waiting on that. I don't know. So we talked before last week about Odyssey being delisted now from the New York Stock Exchange. Well, NASDAQ now is looking to give a delisting warning to Salem Radio Group. So they got a letter that they're in danger of being delisted for not complying with the stock exchange's $1 minimum price requirement. And now they're joining Odyssey, which was delisted by the New York Stock Exchange in May and moved to the OTC markets. Urban One has also received a pair of delisting warning letters. Urban One's issue is failing to submit a 2022 annual report to the SEC. Odyssey is going to execute a reverse stock split, reducing the number of outstanding shares to increase its share price. That's pathetic. Salem has 6 months right now, or 180 calendar days, to get back into NASDAQ's good graces, achieving a minimum bid price of $1 per share for at least 10 consecutive business days. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. Right now, early trading, and that was June 26th, Salem stock was up to 99 cents. Well, let's look at what it is right now. Currently, it's 95 cents. And if you look at the across the board, just in the last 5 days, we can see it's gone. It got to 99 cents, as we mentioned, on June 26th, staying there. And then it took a sharp drop Tuesday morning down to 92 cents. And it's now continued to drop lower and lower. It's now at 95. I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and it's the point of these companies are not making any money on advertising revenue. Not making money on much of anything. And then you have these private equity groups, and who owns these stations? Why are these companies allowed to continue to hold on to these stations when they can't hold on to anything? They're not able to make any significant money on these stations. They try to put themselves out there publicly traded, and no one wants to buy them. Does everybody understand this? It's continuing to go along too long, and there's no real answers here. It's pathetic. I'm kind of confounded here. For all this to continue to keep happening. This is why radio doesn't want to do anything either. Like, they're not in the business of trying to make money anyway. And if they are, they're doing a horrible job of it. Antiquated protocols, methods, and a delusional sense that they're losing the war on the listener. They're not getting the listeners back. They're not doing anything to do anything about it. That's a big problem. Okay, we're going to leave it there. That's the show for tonight. Thank you for finding the show as you always do. And by all means, if you haven't done so, please think about it. Go ahead and rate and review the show. Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please do that. And if you can, please listen to the show on audio so you can catch the commercials so I can actually get a little revenue to go and help out with the show. That would be greatly appreciated. And pass the word along. Also, the show's on YouTube and all my content is available. Broadcasterspodcast.com. You can find everything there. Broadcasterspodcast.com. Also, don't forget that if you want to find all my programming, which includes the Resicles podcast, the Praise and the Vatras, you can find that at kingofpodcasts.com. And then more importantly, if you want to go ahead and follow along with me on social media, I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at King of Podcasts. Until next week, remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.